All right, so this section is on research design. The last section was on research strategy. So when we went through all that material on the different forms of quantitative research and the different forms of qualitative research, those are your research strategies. The research design is the specific tactics that you're going to use to carry out the research strategy that you have picked. So a research design is a plan outlining how you're going to answer your research question. Research design has two primary functions: to answer your research question, but to also control for extra factors, nuisance factors that could possibly impact your dependent variables, and thereby create alternative interpretations to your results. So let's say I'm going to put together an aphasia study. So I'm going to look at how people with aphasia respond to a particular form of therapy. I would need my design to control for spontaneous recovery. So I want all my people in the study to be, we'll say, a year at least post-onset stroke, post-onset of aphasia, because I don't want anyone to be able to look at my study and say, well, he didn't really benefit from the therapy. It wasn't the therapy that was creating the benefit. It was this other factor of spontaneous recovery that you didn't control for that was creating the benefit to the patient. So in this example, I would need a research design that is going to answer my research question: do my participants with aphasia benefit from this aphasia therapy? But if possible, the research design also needs to rule out other factors like spontaneous recovery being a factor in producing my results. And when I say ruling out factors that might influence my results, I'm talking about a bias within my study. So you need within your research design, you need to have procedures that are going to allow you to control for these nuisance factors. In other words, allow you to avoid possible bias. So you want your research design to answer in as clean-cut a fashion as is possible, in as an elegant fashion as is possible. What effect does manipulation of the independent variable have on the dependent variable? So in my last quick example I gave, I want to know what effect this aphasia therapy has on people with aphasia. And I want to arrange the experiment in a way that is going to control for those nuisance variables, those extraneous variables, as much as is possible. That's going to minimize their impact on the results, meaning on the dependent variable. So in experimental research, that is what you do. You arrange the experiment as much as possible to control for extraneous variables. And there are different ways of doing that we're going to get to in a minute. In descriptive research, which, remember, this is still quantitative research, but this is descriptive research, you're not setting up an experiment. So your way of going about controlling for extraneous variables is going to be different. Recall that in descriptive research, you're answering the question you're trying to figure out what the relationship is between natural phenomena. So in order to avoid bias, you want to create your observations, make your observations as systematically as possible and as unobtrusively as possible, so that the relationship that you're trying to look at doesn't get confounded by extraneous variables. We have two broad categories of research design: group designs and single subject designs. Group design is exactly what it sounds like. You're examining the average performance of a group of subjects on the dependent variable. And there are different ways of doing group designs. And we also have single subject designs. Single subject examines the behavior of a single individual subject. And of course, there's different ways of doing that too. And it's also important to note that I could have a single subject study that looks at multiple studies. I'm just looking at them each individually and not looking at them as a group. So I'm analyzing their results and interpreting those results by the individual subject. I'm not looking at them together as a group and averaging their results. To evaluate a research design, we look at two factors: internal validity and external validity. Your internal validity asks, does the study answer the research question? And did it control for extraneous variables? Your external validity concerns the degree to which the findings of the study can be generalized to other populations. So you could see that a single subject design could have easily internal validity in that you're able to answer your research question. You're able to probably more easily control for extraneous variables because it's just one person, so there's less to control. But it may be more difficult to generate external validity for that single subject study because there's only one person. So it's going to be much harder for you to argue that your results generalize to every other person on the face of the planet. And you could see that the opposite of that is true as well. A group study, it's going to be more difficult to control for extraneous variables. But if you are able to control for extraneous variables and answer your research question, then because you have so many more participants, your results are more easily generalizable. So your group study can more easily have external validity than your single subject designs. So let me give you an example. Let's say we're going to do a single subject study. We're going to take someone with aphasia and see if they respond positively to a form of therapy. As already mentioned, I would need to make sure that this guy is well post onset of his aphasia to account for spontaneous recovery. But other than that, I just need to make sure that, well, he probably hasn't recovered any within the last couple of years since spontaneous recovery ended. So I just need to make sure that nothing else in his life changes other than me implementing the therapy. And it'll probably be pretty well controlled. And I'll be able to pretty accurately answer if he is benefiting from this aphasia therapy or not. So it would be easy to quickly get to some internal validity with this single subject design. But regarding external validity, if I am trying to make the argument in front of people that, well, this guy responded positively to the therapy, I can't then jump to, therefore, we need to use this form of therapy with everyone with aphasia because this is only one guy with only one kind of aphasia. I would need to look at a lot more people with lots of different kinds of aphasia and see how they respond before I'm able to make that argument. Now, let's say we're going to do the opposite. We're going to put together a group study for aphasia. And I've done this, and it is difficult because you want to try to control for things. And people with aphasia are usually very different from one another. Ideally, you want them all to be the same age or very close to the same age. Ideally, you want them all to have the same aphasia type. Or you want to have 100 people so that you have like 20 people, each with the same aphasia type. And you can look at all different kinds of aphasia. And also you want to control for, ideally within this group of people with aphasia, you want their concomitant deficits to all be relatively the same. So you want all their cognitive deficits to be relatively the same, all their perceptual deficits to be relatively the same, so that no one can come back behind you and argue that your results are invalid because those extraneous factors may be influencing how your participants with aphasia responded when given your therapy. So this is to say that it is really difficult to establish strong internal validity on a aphasia group study because everyone is so different. It's hard to control for lots of different factors. Now, if you could control for all those different factors and you could have strong internal validity, that would be an amazing thing because then you have so many people, because it's a group study, that your external validity is going to be much higher. You're going to be able to make the argument that your results are able to be generalized out away from the participants with aphasia in your study out to other people with aphasia. We have three primary different kinds of group designs. Between subjects. This means you're comparing two or more different groups of individuals. Within subjects, meaning that you have one group and you're examining them in different conditions. And then there is the mixed design, which uses a combination of between subjects and within subjects within the same study.